every week, ensuring that our elected officials don't let these opportunities go to waste. Now please join me in welcoming Governor Jay Inslee to talk to
you. Thank you. Trudy and I are two grandparents who are here who believe that what we have done in Washington to adopt common sense gun legislation, we need to continue to do in Washington to take care of these beautiful children. And I think today is a day of reverence and Martin Luther King, and I think we should start our conversation with a quote from him. He said, "Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot, only love can do that." We speak for the love of our children, the love of our citizens, and the belief that we need common sense gun legislation. Let me just stress the word common sense. Martin Luther King showed deep and abiding courage. In fact, he lost his life in the cause of nonviolence. We are simply asking the legislature to exercise not a mountain of courage, but just a dollop of common sense. Because it is common sense that we do not need weapons of war on the streets of Washington. We do not need high-capacity warlike ammunition magazines on the streets of Washington, or assault weapons of war. This doesn't take courage, it just takes a little bit of common sense. It is common sense that our citizens deserve a better chance to survive. Jim Parsons' daughter deserved a better chance to survive. And we're in favor of giving our citizens a better chance to survive. And why should we act? We must act because the federal government under this president will not. And it is a great disappointment of a president who said he was going to show courage to stand up. The NRA has done nothing on gun safety. We have to protect our own people. Their safety is in our hands. I'll just close with this comment. We had Washingtonians here expressing their First Amendment right to contest these bills, and we respect that right. And they argued that these bills would violate the Second Amendment. While we respect that right to say so, we have to fundamentally disagree. And in fact, the courts have ruled on these bills already. These bills have been in place in other places across the United States, and they have been upheld time after time in the United States. These bills do not violate the Second Amendment. The failure to adopt them will violate the rule of common sense. So we are hopeful this year that we continue to join together to move common sense gun safety legislation forward. I want to thank everyone. Bob Ferguson has done great work, our AG, and everyone here. Trudy.
Members of Congress voted to pass the assault weapon ban, which was in place for 10 years, and we are still working on that. After that passed, I became a board of Mothers Against Violence in America, which has now sunsetted, but on the way to one of their meetings is when I heard on the radio about Columbine. And here we are today still fighting the same fight, but we're making progress thanks to Renee and other groups. So I just want to tell you, don't give up. We need to make your voices heard, and thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Now Jay has to go, but you're going to.
Okay, thank you so much, Governor. Okay, so now I would like to turn it over to a representative from the Attorney General's office, Yasmin Trudeau.
Thank you everyone for coming out today and engaging on these life-saving measures. My name is Yasmin Trudeau. I'm Legislative Director for the Washington State Attorney General, Bob Ferguson. The Attorney General sends his regrets for not being able to make it today, but he wants me to assure the public that these gun violence prevention measures, like limiting the capacity of detachable magazines, as was heard by Chair Peterson today, thank you, and regulating ammunition sales is a top priority. We thank the Governor, the Alliance, and the incredible legislative sponsors for their partnership and work on these important measures, because enough is enough. Tragically, we know it isn't a matter of if, but a matter of when the next mass shooting will occur. Let's do better than thoughts and prayers. Let's take action together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. And now I would like to ask King County Councilmember Girmay Zahile to join us.
Hello everyone, my name is Girmay Zahile. I'm a county council member. I want to thank everybody on this stage, everybody who's been working tirelessly in the fight. Seattle and South King County, too many young men are being shot and killed, and I wanted to make sure that their voices are included in this conversation. Some of these young men are people that I grew up with. They were my younger brothers. I grieve for them. I grieve for the parents who will never see their children again. I grieve for the and in heavy times, as many of you do, in an article he wrote titled "The Crisis in American Cities," he submitted a quote from Victor Hugo which said, "If the soul is left in darkness, sins will be committed. The guilty one is not he who commits the sins, but he who creates the darkness." For the young men who are shooting and being shot, the darkness looks like compounding policy failures. Poverty is a policy failure. Wide-scaled unaddressed trauma is a policy failure. Parents who aren't home because they're working multiple jobs is a policy failure. And yes, the accessibility of high-capacity magazines and other dangerous weapons is a policy failure. People on the ground addressing the recent spike in gun violence in my district are telling me they're seeing levels of ammunition that they have never seen before. I urge us, everyone in this room, to take a comprehensive approach to gun violence, investing in community-based solutions, lifting the state preemption on local regulation so that local governments can be more of a partner to the state, and also banning high-capacity magazines. Thank you all so much for your time. Now is the time for us together to solve this crisis. I urge the state to continue working with local governments to create the safe communities that we all deserve. Thank you so much.
Councilmember. And now I'd like to welcome Andrea Altheimer, Coach and Ambassador for Passageways, to say a few words.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Altheimer, and I'm a coach and an ambassador with Community Passageways. I take the opportunity to talk about what violence looks like in communities like mine. Just a couple of weeks ago, the Seattle Police Department released a review showing that shootings, both fatal and non-fatal, have increased in 2019. The neighborhoods that saw the biggest change were all in the South Precinct. The gun violence that takes place in South Seattle and South King County often does not make headlines, and it doesn't tend to gain attention from elected officials either. I am so happy to finally see this year there's a proposal to create an Office of Firearm Violence Prevention. This office would identify gaps in data and research and develop policy options. But most importantly, this office will task with better supporting victims of violence, and it would establish a grant program to support community-based violent prevention or intervention programs. Supporting victims of violence and investing in programs created by and for communities most impacted by gun violence is the best way to interrupt cycles of violence that terrorize too many communities. I know firsthand how impactful these programs can be. At Community Passageways, we work with youth who have gotten into some form of trouble. Many have found themselves caught in gun violence. We support them through mentorship, healing circles, and diversion court systems. By building a support system or network in thriving communities, we help provide alternatives to violence for these young individuals. Programs like Community Passageways that are created for and by people who know what gun violence really looks like in our communities will provide alternatives for these young people before it is too late. So much of the work to prevent gun violence is focused on preventing the kind of tragedies we see on news or on TV. This is important work, but this bill is an important step towards centering and prioritizing the kind of gun violence that terrorizes communities every day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And now I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Fred Rivara, Director of the Firearm Injury and Policy Research Program at Harborview Medical Center. Dr. Rivara has spent his distinguished career treating and researching gun violence.
Active member at the University of Washington and Director of Firearm Injury and Policy Research. To date, one of the most effective things we've done in Washington to reduce gun violence is to put in safeguards that help prevent guns from falling into the hands of those who might use them to harm themselves or others. Background checks, extreme risk protection orders, and domestic violence orders. This session, another such measure is in front of the legislature. This is a proposal to address the deadly intersection between alcohol abuse and firearms. And the link between alcohol abuse and firearm violence towards self and others is well established. Right now, Washington law prohibits firearm possession after a felony DUI. The new research shows a clear link between any single DUI and future violence acts. We can help keep guns out of the hands keep guns out of crisis situations by temporarily restricting access to firearms after a second DUI conviction while incentivizing treatment. As a physician, I want to highlight that the goal of this policy is not to further stigmatize alcohol use disorders. The goal is to remove the threat of firearms that allow for a safe recovery environment. This proposal will incentivize treatment and encourage continued sobriety where appropriate by allowing for early restoration of firearm rights. DUI convictions only identify a subset of individuals with alcohol abuse disorders, but they represent a uniquely dangerous group. Restricting access to firearms is a common sense step that will save lives. Time and time again, Washingtonians have shown that they want action to keep guns out of the hands of those who might harm themselves or others. This proposal is one way that our lawmakers can do just that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rivara. And now I'd like to invite Andrew Hong, Director of March for Our Lives Washington, to the podium. And I think this is a great time to call out just how this movement is such a multi-generational movement. We have representatives from Grandmothers Against Gun Violence, we have Moms Demand Action, we have March for Our Lives, and the Boy Scouts. So just highlighting how important this issue is across the age spans in our country. Andrew?
Thank you, Renee. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Hong. I am a senior at Cleveland High School in South Seattle and co-director of March for Our Lives Washington. I was born 4 years after Columbine, which makes me a part of the mass shooting generation. School shootings and mass shootings, in some way or another, have affected millions of young people across America, including myself. Last year, I found myself huddled behind a row of bookshelves because there was an active shooter on my campus. My teacher piled chairs against windows and stood guard at the door with a golf club. We held our backpacks against ourselves to use as shields. It was dead silent. No one moved, no one spoke. However, the strangest part of those 30 minutes wasn't the fear or anxiety. It was how unremarkable all of it felt. There was no panic, no crying. We all knew what to do because, like every American child, we have spent our entire lives doing active shooting drills. It turned out that only one person had been injured. I remembered thinking, only one person, not a big deal. No one else seemed to think it was a big deal either. Teachers calmly prepped for their next class. Students walked to their 7th-period room. There were no TV news stations or reporters. One teenager had been non-fatally shot. This wasn't news, this was business as usual. But that doesn't make it right. This is why I'm here today, because gun violence shouldn't be business as usual. Gun violence, however, doesn't just plague our schools. We live in a country where someone is killed by a gun every 15 minutes and where 1,100 people die from police shootings every year, particularly Black and brown men. In communities of color especially, like my home in South Seattle, gun violence feels inescapable. That is why I'm speaking up, because I and young people in this country refuse to sit idly by while my brothers and sisters are killed. And because my generation has learned that we can't wait for adults around us to take action, we must demand it. I am proud to be here, especially on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, to continue the tradition of radical social change begun by young people in the civil rights movement and so many other social causes. Like them, we are ready to do whatever it takes to save lives. This year, the legislator has a real chance to take meaningful action to reduce gun violence. We are counting on them to give us a future more free of gun violence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And now, I think we're gonna turn it over to Jim Parsons, please, tell his story.
We're just gonna pause for a
And Anne Marie is
second.
going to join as well.
Sir, it's gonna take a second. You maybe center yourself up on the table, sir, unless that's reading.
Want me to stand on the table?
No, sir. Thank you.
Tell me when it's my turn.
Get back to the cameras. Thank you, sir.
Ready? Okay. Hello, my name is Jim Parsons. I'm here with my wife, Anne Marie. On October 1, 2017, our daughter, Carrie Parsons was murdered in the Las Vegas massacre. In total, 1,049 rounds were fired into a crowd of more than 20,000 in less than 10 minutes. 100-round magazines were emptied in just over 10 seconds. Our daughter lived life joyfully. Carrie was 31 years old, a graduate of Arizona State University. She made friends wherever she went. She loved her job, her Seahawks, and her Mariners. And Carrie she was returning home from a business trip and stopped in Las Vegas to see friends, and it wasn't high-risk behavior. She was in love, she was happy, she had a future. But Carrie was buried the following week. Our current gun laws make mass shootings inevitable. And for our family, the inevitable occurred on October 1st in Las Vegas. But it doesn't have to be this way. Without assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, I believe our daughter would be alive today. I'm not asking to eliminate guns. All I'm asking is common sense laws that can spare another family from the pain that mine has endured. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. So I think we can open it up for questions.
You want to move the mics back up, guys?
Are the mics fine here, or do you want to move them back up?
Whatever is convenient and comfortable.
Renee, I'll ask you.
Yeah.
It's a short session. You guys have a very aggressive agenda, which you'd like to accomplish. High capacity magazines being one of them. If legislators don't